This is the Deliberate Talks Weekly Podcast, powered by the Pixelated Egg Digital Ventures. Tune in every week to learn something new about digital marketing and entrepreneurship. And now, over to the voice of your host, Dakshin Adyanthaya. Enjoy the show.
Hello and Happy New Year's to all of you, and hoping you all have a fabulous 2022. And kickstarting today's episode, I have someone with me who ensures this show reaches its best potential and to your favorite audio platforms every Monday. In the virtual studios today is Aditya Kuber. Hi Aditya, how are you doing?
Hey Dakshin, pleasure to be here and happy to be on the first recording you're doing in the new year.
Yeah, Happy New Year to you. And hope this year brings a lot of success to you as well. For everyone who's wondering who Aditya is the co-founder of Idea Brew Studios, an organization that creates podcasts and offers branded audio solutions. And to know more about him, tell me, Aditya, how did you get into the world of audio and what were you doing before that?
I've actually been in the podcast space for a little over 5 years now. Mm-hmm. And for podcasting, that sounds like a lifetime because it is. Professionally, I've been in the media space. I started out as a photographer about 20 odd years ago and transitioned to being a writer, to managing content, running magazines, ran an advertising and marketing and content business for a while in between, exit that, and that's when I landed up in the digital audio or podcast spaces, Mm-hmm. So I set up Audio Boom India's operations in 2016. Mm-hmm. Moved on from there to Book My Show and set up their audio streaming business. I headed content and strategy for Book My Show for a few years. Mm-hmm. And then, the entrepreneurial bug doesn't really go away that easily. So about a year and a half ago, decided that this is a good time to jump back right in the midst of the whole COVID fiasco, by the way. Right. And that's when podcasting was just starting to pick up again. Yeah. And in the last 18 months, we've built a fairly large network of shows. We now manage about 120 podcasts, including this fantastic show you're all listening to, by the way. Plus, we create a lot of original content for platforms that you all would typically be listening to. We're also one of the few agencies out there who work with brands on offering audio solutions, either through advertising on podcasts or through creating bespoke content that brands want to use to reach audiences. Right. So that's a very short summary of what we do.
Right. And I'm going to get into each of those bits in a little more detail. But Aditya, you said 2016, 2016 for audio. What was it like when you were working there? Like, what was your daily routine like trying to build in something which wasn't really popular back then?
It was so unique that, and I still give this example in some cases, where I could put down the list of podcasters in India in half a page. There were about 25 or 30 of them. I might still have that list somewhere. Right. And the biggest struggle was finding a podcast that was being created in India. Right. The business model for Audio Boom was you would bring on a show onto the platform, help it get distributed, and distribution also, to be honest, at that point was very limited. Mm-hmm. JioSaavn was just starting out. Most of the other audio platforms that we now listen to didn't have either a podcast vertical or just didn't exist in India. And so JioSaavn plus maybe Apple Podcasts and a few others were there. Just to give you a sense of scale, India as a whole was around a 4 million plays a year business. Mm-hmm. And today, India is set up to be almost 100 million podcast listeners. Wow. So 25x growth in about 4 to 5 years' time. Right. And back then, the daily routine, if you ask me, a lot of time was just spent trying to find out, hey, are you a podcaster? Here's what we could do for you. Right. And then convincing them to kind of move to us. And a lot of them did, because to them, this was the first time someone was actually reaching out to them to say that, you can do more. There is a revenue opportunity for you. The real challenge happened when we started going out to some brands and trying to pitch them podcasts to advertise against. For brands, it was like, dude, 4 million is like what we get on video in half a day. Right. So why should we even consider this? Right. So that was a very, very large challenge. Thankfully, there were a few brands, agencies who were willing to take a risk. There was some initial brands that did come on board, experimented with it, and a lot of them have stuck on.
Interesting. And because this was also during the popular phase of radio, did you get a lot of people who said, there's already radio existing? Is this like a digital version of a radio show? Or, budding RJs, did this kind of become like a portfolio for them saying, let me start a podcast show and then probably I'll get my recognition? Did you face something like this?
To some extent, yes. Radio was the preeminent audio sort of consumption pattern that time. Music streaming was just about getting started. Most people were still listening to the free versions. For RJs and stuff, their audiences were already set up on radio. Social media was thereabouts. It wasn't as big as it is today. TikTok didn't exist. Right. So from an audience or a profile building point of view, even podcasts wasn't top of mind for a lot of the RJs or for a lot of the non-core creators, if you want to call them that. Right. So the way today we see a lot of celebrities also looking to create a podcast, or experts looking at podcasts as a very viable route to build an audience. That definitely wasn't the case 5 years ago. One of the things that we definitely saw was a lot of passion-led creators who had something to say, who were very digitally savvy and who had a very strong connect back to, let's say, the West, where podcasting was already somewhat accepted. Mm-hmm. Those were the guys who were very keen to pick up podcasting.
Okay. And from your organization point of view, you did mention it's 18 months, right? So that's when everyone was at home already trying to do something of their own. It's like me starting my podcast because I had a little more time at home, right? Now, from an organization point of view, why does an individual need to come to Idea Brew Studios? And, because people who are at home creating their own podcast, publishing it and editing it by themselves. What was the need that you identified it back then, that a service like yours was also the need of the hour during pandemic?
So one of the major reasons is how good is the content you're creating at home. See, when you're living in a silo of your own and saying that what I'm creating is good, you also start to think that the 50 people that are listening to me is great. Mm-hmm. What you're not realizing is there is a larger opportunity out there for growth and discoverability. Mm-hmm. That's the bigger role that we play. We find great creators. We find that there is a great opportunity to grow this show, and that whatever they're saying has the opportunity to reach far more listeners. Right. So what we do is we engage with a creator at very different stages, at almost every stage of their life cycle. And in most cases, we've sat down and we've said, look, this is your current show format. Here are a few more things that you could do to change it up. If you do a few of these things, some platforms will start to promote you. You'll find your audiences here. And let's look at growth. And more often than not, over the past 18 months, we've been able to grow any show that we've taken on. Plus, we're able to also start delivering revenue to a lot of these guys, whether it is through programmatic means, whether it is through sponsorship means. And in fact, while last year was a lot about laying the groundwork, creating awareness and, just establishing scale, we're already seeing a lot of positive intent from agencies. And in the last 3 working days itself, we've had more requests come in than we had in probably the whole of December about podcasting, asking us, hey, how can this brand be a part of a podcast? Is there a podcast we can associate with, or do you think we should create our own? So it's a evolutionary process. We've spent the last 18 months creating awareness and understanding of the medium. So the reason why anyone would work with us is to now latch on to that growth train.
Speaking about that growth rate again, from 2019, 2020 is when more creators started coming into the picture, And then there was, with creators, a lot of new platforms coming in as well. Now, how are platforms performing from a listener's language and region specific wise? Which is the best platform to be on, and from a statistics point of view, which is performing really well?
So there isn't one platform that is better than the other. Every platform has its own core audience, and there are different reasons. So for instance, people tend to pick a platform because they like the way it behaves, or they like the features, or some just like the way it looks. Yes, it's a valid reason. And there are others for whom they find the content that they want there surfacing far better. Say, for example, Apple Podcasts is the oldest podcasting app out there. And there are Apple loyalists who still prefer to use it because it's a very natural, native user experience.
Right.
That is what keeps them there. Plus, it is the largest library of content. But in a market like India, where Apple phones themselves have limited reach, they don't account for as much. But despite that, there are some pieces of content that outperform other apps when compared with Apple. So it's a niche, and niche content, high-end content, possibly in a way of manner of speaking, does well on Apple. Then there are regional language content pieces that do better on some other apps. So, for instance, JioSaavn or Gaana. These are great apps where we've seen very high consumption of regional language content. The third kind of example is a Spotify, who themselves have now created a very large library of content through exclusives and originals. And they've built a very strong following for a certain type of content, which is a mix of fiction and non-fiction, but they're also using other signals and indicators from the music business to help podcasts get discovered. So each app has found a niche, they've found a way to work and found a way to succeed. There is no one clear sort of a best app out there right now.
Right. Okay. And what's it like from the advertising opportunities on these platforms for brands at this point of time? How is the performance measured on these platforms if anyone wants to start advertising?
So for advertising, there are two ways that most people are engaging right now. One is they're buying ads on a CPM basis, which is a fairly standard buying methodology. It's how video ads are sold. Second is in sponsorship formats. So while sponsorships are harder to come by, any show that is getting a sponsor is definitely a show that's doing very well. It's established a strong audience. It's also got a consistency of publishing and a certain quality of content that it stands for. The standard advertising route is for very tactical purposes that is being used by brands, and that's more to target a specific demographic or a specific geography for the product. So take, for example, an auto brand or a generic finance brand or a bank who want to reach out to a broader audience and therefore are happy to be associated with 12 shows, all of which reach a specific type of audience. Programmatic advertising is starting to take off in a very big way in India for audio. To those in the business who are aware of what programmatic is, I don't need to explain it, but in general, it basically matches a listener consuming a type of content to a specific ad that wants to reach out to that audience in real time. And programmatic ads served in audio as a part of a piece of content is the next phase that will really grow this year, because till last year, the inventory availability was low. Not a lot of creators, not a lot of shows were open for programmatic advertising. As that continues to increase, more and more advertising agencies and media buyers are starting to see the value of this.
Right. And from a future perspective, where do you think, with more and more brands being interested in more and more creators and platforms coming into the picture, what do you think would be the key matrix in the future, and where do you see this evolving as a service as well?
So I think more qualitative data points will start to be considered, while overall listens will remain a bigger indicator of scale. There are advertisers and there are brands already who are asking the question to say, hey, how much time is being spent listening to your show? How many people are listening to this from which geography? So these are the sort of questions that will start coming out, because advertisers eventually are all about ROI. They are all about, what is this 1,000 rupees that I invest going to get me?
Okay. And Aditya, also from a creator's perspective, we know now the business side of it, and we know from the platforms side of it. But from a creator's perspective, why do you think more and more creators are not, directly jumping into the trend of audio yet? I think one of the challenges is language. But do you come across various other challenges why people refrain from audio? This also includes brands refraining from investing in audio. What do you think is the challenge and barrier at this point of time?
One of the bigger challenges, like I said, is the measurability. So there is still some inconsistency in measurability. So, for instance, what is the difference between downloads and listens? These are a couple of metrics that every platform throws out there. And it does at times lead to confusion for a brand. Second is, where will my show be heard? Now, unlike video ads or even, let's say, short form video content ads, which is more app led, the podcasting ecosystem is slightly different in the sense the same content is available on 25 different apps. So, which is the best app for me? And if is my ad going to play there? How am I going to measure the return on investment? These are the standard questions that keep coming up in every case. So, as we start reaching a stage where more individual apps are answering these questions with more data, we should be able to get far better brands and far better results for brands as well.
And what drives a creator today to move to audio from writing or video? From the creators that you have worked with some wonderful names, firstly. So, what do you think really motivates them to move to audio from writing and video?
It's a newish medium. It's still largely uncluttered. There is still a chance to actually become a larger influencer and play a bigger role as a creator. So that's one opportunity that they can latch on to. Second is the fact that, as from a consumer point of view, there is a lot more that a creator can do. When you're writing, the effort for reading becomes at times a barrier to reach because literacy rates are very high in India, but still they can become a bit of a barrier. Discoverability is also a challenge because SEO is a science unto itself to a lot of people. Whereas with audio, you can be more expressive. You can be far more engaging. It's a very intimate medium to reach out to your audience. Your biggest problem to solve in audio is discoverability. Once you've solved that, it's been shown that listeners are far more loyal. I mean, there are shows out there which are 2 to 3 hours per episode that see 70-80% completion rates. There are short form shows. There are medium format shows, 20, 30, 40 minutes. All of these have an audience so long as the content is done well and has a purpose for existence.
Right.
So for a creator, audio is a new frontier that's still available for the taking, almost, I'd say.
Right. And because you worked with so many of them right from the last 18 months, which has been your favorite case study to talk about?
You mean other than yours?
Yeah, other than mine.
Well, there's a lot of them. Two of my favorites. One is the show we do with Ankur Variku. And one of the things to take away from Ankur is the consistency and commitment and planning that goes into every episode. With a creator like him, we are never worried about schedule. Because if an episode is to reach us on a Monday, it will reach us on a Monday come hell or high water.
Right.
The second is, after initially setting up audio standards and quality, it has not wavered in the last 10 months. It is the same consistent audio quality. Right. We worked out a couple of formats and that format is stuck to. And the result of that is consistent positioning, consistent presence in most of your top lists. He ended the year as the top podcaster across multiple platforms.
Right.
The show, out of the 120 show, is routinely in the top 2 or the top 3 on our network of shows. Other than him, one of the other, for pure quality of content that I'd highlight is a Formula One podcast that we manage called the Inside Line F1 podcast.
Right.
These guys have been around for a very long time, and 2021, I'd like to say, was a breakthrough year where the numbers just grew. Yes, definitely helped by a fantastic F1 season. But the fact that they're Formula One, they're Indians in a very niche sport or in a very premium sport, as it were. And for them to end the year with a couple of sponsoring engagements already on hand just shows what opportunity lies when you're consistent and committed to your content.
Right. Fantastic. Okay, Aditya, with that, we conclude the first round of questions. It's time to move to round number 2. And this is the rapid fire round of conversations. In 3, ready for this?
Absolutely. Let's go.
Okay. Your favorite podcasts are?
Zach Hofsisuno, which is a horror show I created a long time ago. I just love it. Sorry for that. Second would be a bit of a guilty pleasure almost. I love the financial news made simple by FinShots Daily. It just simplifies finance news. The third would be a new recent sort of a show that we've taken on called Read On Revolution, which is a very nice, again, finance news show, which is, I think, a very nice capsule, bite-sized piece of content that's coming out on a daily basis.
Right. Okay. 3 people you think should have their own podcast but don't have it yet.
I think Shashi Tharoor should have a podcast, for sure.
Right.
MS Dhoni should have one. And for no other reason but to hear what he's thinking, Salman Khan should get a podcast.
Okay. When someone asks you, will podcast make me famous overnight and make me a millionaire? Your answer normally would be?
No. And if you find a way to do that, please tell me, because I also want it.
Okay. Considering mine is one, which are your 4 other favorite shows on Ideal Brew Studios?
I'd go with Sports Weekly with Ayaz Memon. It's one of our first shows. It's a personal favorite. All Indians Matter, which I think it was our first show. Right. And for reasons beyond just that, it's again one of those great examples of consistency, staying focused and on point with what you're doing and what your show stands for.
Right.
Third would be Anupama Chopra reviews, because it's just, very easy after that to figure out what you want to listen to, or rather now watch. And fourth is a new up and coming show called Cut the Crypt, which is a cryptography based show hosted by Rohas Nagpal. And it finally explained to me what the whole crypto scene is, what is an NFT. Although I realized much later I should have just called you to understand it.
Right. Then coming back to the next question, podcast NFTs, is it the next big thing and why?
Absolutely is, because there is a lot of opportunity to create unique sort of tokens, if you want to call them that, within podcasts. Every episode is always unique. And as the medium grows, so will the creators with it, and therefore the value attached to each of these tokens. So I think getting into the NFT space with podcasting right now is probably a great idea, because it's only set up for growth.
Right. Okay. And finally, what's planned for you and your venture this year?
We have a lot happening. In fact, we will have a few of our own originals come out in the next few months.
Wow.
That was something we've been working on for the last few months, and we're taking our time with that. We will also have a slightly different business vertical setup. Unfortunately, I'm not yet in a space to share too much information about that. And more than that, what's exciting us the most are 2 things. One is the launch of a lot of our originals this year with multiple platforms, and the launch of a lot of brand partnered shows. So there's a lot of branded content that we will be putting out this year. And I think that will be a very, very big thing that happens this year for podcasting.
Right. Okay. Fantastic. And finally, 3 reasons why you think podcast is going to blow up in the coming years in India, and why everyone should join the wagon.
The 3 reasons why it's definitely going to explode is, one, there's great creators taking to it. So these are stories you will not get anywhere else. 2, it's become far easier to find and listen to a podcast. There's a podcast for everything or anything that you're in the mood for, literally. Third, from a creator point of view, there is real money that will come to the medium. So if you're a creator, that's one really big reason why you should take to it. Also, a word of caution, it is not easy to create a podcast. Don't think that you have a phone and a recording opportunity so you can record and release and you'll be an overnight star. It doesn't happen. There's a lot of effort that goes into that.
Right.
Dakshin can definitely vouch for that. So it's not easy, but if you put in the hard yards, like with anything else, there's definitely an opportunity this year to start making serious money in podcasting.
Right. Absolutely. Fantastic stuff, Aditya. With that, we come to the end of this episode. Thank you so much for making time for the conversation. And before we go, where can people get in touch with you and follow your work?
Oh, you can catch us on ideabrews.com. That's our website, or audiovala.com. I'm available on Twitter as @Aditya Kuber. So feel free to reach out and drop me a line.
Super. Thank you so much for being a part of the show and best wishes always.
Thanks so much. An absolute pleasure to have been on the show.
And so that brings us to the end of today's conversation. And before we wrap up, here is the interesting fact for the day. Did you know Spotify's podcast hosting tool Anchor hosts nearly 40,000 shows from India, with over half of those launched in 2020? So that's where everyone's starting up, eh? So that's it for today. This is Dakshin Adyanthaya signing off. Don't forget to hit the follow button on your favorite audio platform or get in touch with me at thedeliberatetalks@gmail.com. Join in next Monday for a new episode. Until then, inspire and be inspired.